Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side of podcasting.
After dealing with the breakup and the sudden loss of her mother, Gretchen Fleming found herself back in her hometown of Parkersburg, West Virginia. She was staying with family as she tried to get herself back together and figure out her next move. On December 3rd, 2022, Gretchen told her family that she wasn't going to be home that night, and she headed out to a local bar. After going to a second bar with a friend, Gretchen walked out and was never seen again. Did the friend, who later turned in Gretchen's purse and cell phone, know something about her disappearance? Or was it the man she was seen leaving the last bar with who had something to hide? For over a year, the small town of Parkersburg has been abuzz with theories of what happened that night and continue to hold out hope that someday soon, they will find out who really knows what happened to Gretchen Fleming. When a person goes missing, there's a special kind of pain in the not knowing. I want to tell you the stories of those who never came home. Today, I want to tell you the story of Gretchen Fleming. I'm Kona Gallagher.
And I'm Ethan Flick.
And this is And Then They Were Gone. Welcome back, everyone.
Welcome back.
Thank you for joining us once again. I'm Kona.
And I'm Ethan.
And we're the husband and wife team behind this podcast. Each week, I tell you the story of an unsolved missing persons case. Ethan doesn't know anything about the case going into the episode, and he is here to provide his reactions and questions in real time, hopefully asking some of the same ones you have at home. This week, we're bringing you a case that isn't necessarily bizarre because of the circumstances, but more because of the main person of interest.
Okay.
So I don't want to give too much away, but he definitely has a checkered past.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, there are all sorts of wild rumors about this person, some of which, are pretty well substantiated. Others which are a little more out there. But, we'll talk about that. And this is a small town case of a missing adult, which generally the investigations don't go very well in those situations.
Yeah.
This is very different from missing adult cases that we typically cover, though. Before we get started, though, I want to give a shout out to the newest folks who have joined us over on Patreon. I haven't done this in a few weeks, so thank you very much to Sydney, Shannon M, Dan W, and V Garza. We really appreciate your support.
Thank you all so much.
And as a reminder, you can get these episodes ad-free by subscribing to our Patreon at any level or by subscribing on Apple Podcasts. So with that out of the way, let's get into the story of Gretchen Fleming.
Let's do it.
Gretchen Eve Fleming was born on December 24th, 1994 in Warrenton, Virginia. And as I was reading this...
Warrenton?
Yeah, which is right by us. But as I was reading this, I just realized that her middle name is Eve and she was born on Christmas Eve. So I wonder if that's why they gave her that.
One would assume.
Oh, that's so cute. But yes, so she was born prematurely, only weighing 3 pounds, 12 ounces at birth.
Yikes.
Yeah, so little tiny thing. But she, ended up getting healthy, bouncing back, growing up great. And she was the oldest of 2 children. Gretchen also has a younger sister named Emma. When she was a child, Gretchen's parents divorced, and Gretchen and her sister went to live with their father, David. When Gretchen was about 14, her father met a woman named Jennifer. At first, Gretchen wasn't thrilled about the idea of her dad having a girlfriend and kind of acted in a typical teenage fashion, which, reading between the lines, snotty would be probably a word that they might use.
Sure.
But David and Jennifer ended up getting married, which quickly changed the entire family dynamic as Jennifer had 3-year-old twins.
Oh.
Yes. And it wasn't long before Jennifer and David had a child of their own, making Gretchen the oldest of 5.
Yeah, that's a dramatic shift.
Yeah, and it sounds like there's a pretty big age difference, even between Gretchen and her sister. So, like, Gretchen was the oldest by many years, it sounds like. Gretchen was smart, athletic, and beautiful. Her bubbly personality drew people to her, and she never had trouble making friends. In high school, she loved thrift shopping and always wore clothes that made a statement. Though she always had a book in her hand, by the time high school was ending, Gretchen didn't really know what she wanted to do with her life. What she did know is that she wanted to get out of Parkersburg and, move to a big city. Like, she just had dreams of, being a city girl, basically. So when she graduated high school, Gretchen moved to the Raleigh, North Carolina area. She quickly gathered a great group of friends and worked just a series of jobs as she figured out what to do with her life. Like, she never really nailed down a career, it sounds like, and just kind of worked jobs to make money and to get enough to live and, didn't worry about it. David describes his daughter as a free spirit who wasn't in a rush to settle down or find some corporate job. But while she was in North Carolina, Gretchen met a man and the two started dating. The pair quickly grew serious and, according to Jennifer, even began talking about marriage. They ended up moving to Charleston, West Virginia, but went their separate ways after about a year of dating. Now, around this time, and again, I don't know the exact timeline of all of this, what order everything happened in, but around the time of the breakup and, her moving to Charleston and everything, Gretchen was hit with a tragedy when her mom died unexpectedly. Now, that's difficult, obviously, for any daughter to deal with. But according to David, on an episode of Disappeared about his daughter's case, Gretchen and her mother had had a strained relationship for most of her life. But Gretchen was also her closest relative, and so she was the one who had to make the decision to take her mother off of life support.
Oh my God, that's so heavy.
Yeah. So really difficult for somebody in their 20s. I mean, at any age. I mean, that's awful to have to deal with. But yeah, she was in her 20s and had to make that decision.
That's just insanely tough.
So I think a combination of all of this, the fact that she had this breakup, her mother died, she was in Charleston, West Virginia, which she had no reason to be in. I think all of that led her back to Parkersburg to basically regroup.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Instead of moving back in with her dad, stepmother, and all of their kids, Gretchen decided on the quieter environment of her grandparents' house.
Yeah. Definitely don't blame her there.
Yeah. She got a job at an H&M clothing store at the local mall and pretty much just spent her time working and hanging out with friends at local bars. It may not seem as though a free-spirited 27-year-old woman would enjoy living under her grandparents' roof, but the arrangement seemed to work for them. Gretchen didn't have a car, and her grandmother would often drive her to work. She was obviously free to do whatever she wanted, at night or whenever, but her grandparents did have their limits. They locked the door at, I think, 10 p.m., and if Gretchen wasn't home, then she wasn't home.
Okay.
They didn't want her coming in at all hours, disturbing their sleep. They're like, listen, if you're going to live in an old people's house, you got to keep an old people's schedule or go somewhere else. So that was fine with Gretchen, though. According to Jennifer, she did not mind that at all. And if she was planning on staying out late, she would just make arrangements to stay with friends.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, she's in her 20s,
in her late 20s.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it really, truly was not a big deal for her at all. And she would just carry basically an overnight bag with her. And so that if she was out, she could just, have her some stuff, stay, not a big deal. And it wasn't uncommon for her to even be gone like a couple of days at a time. Like she just didn't really have responsibilities, like she had her job and stuff, but she was a free spirit. She just kind of did what she wanted to do.
All of which I'm assuming adds to a convoluted timeline when she goes missing.
Exactly. So on Saturday, December 3rd, 2022, Gretchen's grandmother, Louise, drove her to work. Gretchen told her grandmother that she was going out after her shift and she was just going to stay somewhere else that night. So don't worry about it. Not coming home tonight. I'll catch you later. And again, this was very common for Gretchen. So Louise was like, all right, great. Bye. Love you. See you later. So Gretchen didn't come home that night, but she had already told her grandmother that she didn't plan on coming home that night. So, it was fine. She didn't come home for a few more days, but again, that was pretty typical. And Gretchen was nearly 28 years old. So again, this is December 3rd. She turned 28 on December 24th. So literally weeks before her 28th birthday. Family members, had been trying to reach her during this period, but it wasn't unusual for Gretchen to either let her phone die or to take a day or two to respond to a text. However, by December 11th, Gretchen's grandmother started to get worried. So, it's been a week or so at this point, and she has not heard from Gretchen, and that is unusual. A day or two here or there is whatever, but this has been a week, and it was getting weird. So Louise went over to David and Jennifer's house and told them that she had not seen or heard from Gretchen since she dropped her off at work on December 3rd. And they hadn't heard from her either, but again, she's almost 28 years old. I think there are a lot of 28-year-olds in the world who will go a week without talking to their parents.
Well, yeah, and especially dad and stepmom who now have a full litter of new kids, essentially.
Yeah.
I can't imagine, aside from visiting just to be the older sister or whatever, can't imagine she spends a whole lot of time over there just hanging out in general.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like she did at all. Yeah, you're absolutely right. They were a relatively close family, but yeah, she wasn't over there every day or anything like that. Before Louise came to their house, David and Jennifer had no inkling that anything was amiss with Gretchen whatsoever. But obviously, once they heard that she hadn't been heard from or seen since the 3rd, they're like, okay, yeah, that's not great. They obviously tried calling her and texting her and, got nowhere. So David decided that day that they were going to jump in the car and go around to the places that they knew she would hang out, right? And just see if anybody had seen her. Because that's the other thing about this. She's 28 years old. And though she grew up there, a lot of her friends from high school, were gone, so she had kind of made new friends and her parents didn't have their numbers or anything like that.
Right.
They didn't know her friends. So it's not like they could just start calling people necessarily. They had to just physically jump in the car and just go to places where she hung out and just see what was going on. So that's what he did.
But at the same time, probably not a very large town.
No, not at all.
So
yeah,
there's probably not a whole lot of spots for them to go.
Well, exactly. Yeah, it was a limited number of places. So they had a good idea of where to look, but they didn't have specific people necessarily to go to, So they ended up at a local bar called the Front Row. They went inside and asked the bartender if they knew Gretchen. And the bartender's like, oh yeah, no, I totally know Gretchen. She was actually in here last week. The bartender also told them that they had Gretchen's purse. Apparently, Gretchen had been at the Front Row on December 3rd with a guy who is referred to as John on that episode of Disappeared, but according to Facebook is actually a man named Jason Pape. So I don't know if Jason's his middle name or his first name and he goes by John or, whatever. I don't know. We'll just call him John/Jason. But from what I've been able to gather, the two are kind of bar friends, know? Like, they knew each other from around. They didn't necessarily like hang out outside of the bar. Like, he's apparently married and, they were both at the front row that night. They hung out, and after a while, they decided to go to another bar called My Way Lounge. It was karaoke night, and apparently Gretchen wanted to go for that. So she didn't have a car, remember?
Right.
And so John/Jason was like, yeah, cool. Like, we can go over there. And so he gave her a ride, and the two of them went over to My Way Lounge. Now, according to John/Jason, they got to My Way and, hung out. They were friends, but they weren't like together, So they were both often in different sections of the bar talking to different people throughout the night. He said that when he was about ready to head out, he went to the bathroom, but once he got out, he didn't see Gretchen. He walked outside to see if she was out there, but didn't see her. So apparently he hadn't paid the tab. And so he went back in, paid up, went back outside, still didn't see her, and was a little worried because, again, he knew she didn't have a car. He didn't see her leave the bar. He had no idea what was going on. So he said he got into his car and started driving around to see if she had just decided to walk. So he got in the car, drove around, kind of drove to the downtown area, which was very close to the bar. Didn't see her. Then he went back to the bar to see if she had come back, went back inside the bar, and then didn't see her. The problem with this, other than the fact that, he was supposed to give her a ride home and couldn't find her, was that once he had gotten into his car, he realized that her purse and cell phone were in his car. She had left both of those items in her car when he was driving her from the front row to My Way.
Okay, so do we have anybody that can corroborate whether she was actually there?
Yes, we were going to get to that.
Okay.
Yes. So this is just, you're right. This is just his version of the story right now.
Yeah, and automatically this seems fishy as hell.
Oh, absolutely.
Went to the bathroom, came out, didn't see her, so I immediately started looking for her and got in my car and drove around town looking for, you know what I mean?
Right.
That.
And she left her purse and cell phone in my car and never took them into the second bar at all. Didn't realize she didn't have them.
All seems very fishy. So
yeah, no, absolutely.
So there is a witness that saw her in the second bar.
Yes, we will get to all of that. So after he drives around a little bit, looks for her, doesn't find her, goes back to the bar. Still, she's not back there. And so he's like, well, at this point, he doesn't know what to do. It's late, late. And so he's just like, okay, well, I guess I'll go home, because he just literally doesn't know what else to do in this situation. He goes home, gets some sleep. And then the next day, he has her purse and her cell phone. And so he takes it back to the front row, which is the first bar. And it's a place where he knows that she goes a lot. And so because he doesn't have her address, they're not outside friends, he doesn't know where she lives. He has her cell phone, so he obviously can't call her. So he doesn't know where else to take it. So he just takes it back to the bar, and he assumes that whenever she wakes up from wherever it is she went, she'll go, oh shit, where's my purse? And then hopefully go back to the first bar to look for it. So that's his thought process. Cut to December 11th, when Dave goes to the bar. And the bartender's like, oh yeah, we've had her purse. She was in here and we've had her purse all week and she never came to get it. Dave immediately knew that something had happened because, nobody leaves their purse and their cell phone sitting at a bar for a week.
Yeah. Right.
That's not a thing that people do. So he's like, okay, this is bad. And so obviously his suspicions went right to this dude who turned in her purse and her cell phone. Cause
I'm still suspicious of him.
Right. And David didn't know him. They're like, oh yeah, it's this guy, John or whatever. And he's like, okay, I don't know this person. Why did he have my daughter's stuff? Why did he turn it into this bar? What is happening? He ended up contacting him. David ended up contacting him. And the story that I just laid out is the story that John/Jason told David, So that's kind of how we get this first like rough timeline of events of that night. This is all happening on the 11th. And once they get her stuff back to the house, they plug in her phone. And, again, I don't know if they do this before they end up getting a hold of John/Jason or after, but either way, it's all happening around the same time. But they plug in her cell phone because it's dead, obviously, by this point.
Yeah.
And they look through her calls and texts and everything because apparently in 2022, this woman did not have her phone password protected, which is like wild to me. I didn't even know you could do that on a phone anymore.
Yeah, I didn't know that you can either.
Yeah, I don't know. But on the episode of Disappeared, that's what they said. So regardless, they got into the phone and they were able to look at her calls and texts and everything. And, I'm sure they were able to open like Facebook and,
Right.
all of those apps, right? And what they saw was that everything from her stopped on December 3rd.
Mm.
Like, there, I'm sure were incoming calls and texts
but
and
no
things, but
outgoing,
nothing
no
from
posts.
her. Yeah, nothing. Like no social media, no texts, nothing from her after December 3rd. So by this point, they're like, okay, like this is obviously extremely
that's
bad.
not a good sign.
Yeah. And so on December 12th, Gretchen's family reported her missing. Now, because of the alarming circumstances surrounding her disappearance, Parkersburg police did not waste any time with, she's an adult, she can stay out if she wants to.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. They immediately started an investigation, though they were obviously hindered by the fact that it had been 9 or 10 days since she was last seen.
Right.
But they started their investigation by retracing her steps on the night of December 3rd. So they spoke to people at both bars, and everybody, bartenders, whoever, basically corroborated the story that John/Jason had told her family.
Okay.
They were also able to further corroborate his story by pulling surveillance footage from My Way.
Oh, okay.
So My Way apparently had several cameras. They were actually working, and they actually still had the footage, things that you often don't see in these cases.
Yeah.
So that was a huge help to the investigation. Again, because they were starting, a week and a half after the fact.
Right. With only this guy's
weird story.
Yeah. It still doesn't make any sense. Corroborated or not, it still does not make any sense.
It's still a weird story for sure. But once they pulled the surveillance footage, police were also able to uncover an important new clue: a second man. Parkersburg police have been keeping the specifics of their investigation pretty close to the vest, but after they pulled the footage from the bar, My Way's owners contacted David directly and asked him if he wanted to come in and take a look at the footage. So they gave the police everything that they had, but they're like, hey, we know your daughter's missing. Do you want to see it too?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he was like, yes, obviously. And he described what he saw on that episode of Disappeared. And I want to play that just so you can hear it in his words.
And he was talking to a couple other people, and she was kind of just sitting there by herself. Well, then comes in the picture a man out of the gambling room. He stands beside her and ends up bringing her a drink. Then they end up talking, and they go back into the gambling room together, probably for about a half hour, 45 minutes. And then they come out of the gambling room, and the man ends up walking out the door, and she's walking right behind him. John ends up going to the bathroom, so when Gretchen comes out of the gambling room to leave, he was actually in the bathroom, so he didn't see her leave. So he comes out of the bathroom, and then the bar's getting ready to close down there. And he's looking for her and can't find her because he was going to give her a ride home. And then the footage actually shows Gretchen leaving with the man and his car driving away.
So gambling man comes out, starts talking to her.
Mm-hmm.
Then they leave together.
Well, you're right. So he comes out of the gambling room, gives Gretchen a drink.
Okay.
He and Gretchen then go into the gambling room together.
Ah.
Now, I don't know if there was a camera in the gambling room or not. It kind of sounds like there isn't.
Yeah.
Because we don't have any details about
what was
that.
going on in there.
Yeah. But it sounds like Gretchen had been drinking a lot throughout the night already, right? So I would assume, and I do not know this is purely my assumption, that if he gave her a drink and then they're in the gambling room for another 30 to 45 minutes, I would guess that she probably had at least one more drink during that period. And then the camera shows them coming out of the gambling room, and John/Jason is in fact in the bathroom.
Right.
They leave, or it should be said, he leaves. She follows directly behind him. And this is all around 3 a.m.
The surveillance footage shows them getting into his car.
No. So what it shows is them leaving, but because of where his car was parked, it does not show either of them getting into his car. But then an outside camera does pick up his car driving away.
Okay. So we know what kind of car he
Yes.
has.
Yes. We know the car. Police identified it. Like, they are certain that they see his car on the footage leaving directly after he left the bar. But they don't physically have video of Gretchen or him entering the car.
Okay.
What this sounds like is that a single 27-year-old woman hit it off with a man at the bar and went home with him.
Sure.
I promise you. Promise you.
She left her purse and cell phone, though.
Right. But beyond that, because you could think, okay, she's drunk. She forgot about her purse and cell phone. Whatever. Best case scenario. She's just like, really, like, I'm going to go home with this dude. I promise you that is not what happened here. It was quickly determined that the man Gretchen was seen leaving with was 55-year-old Preston Pierce. Preston is and was well known around Parkersburg, and not for anything good. I usually don't like go and start disparaging people's like looks and stuff on this show. But to anyone listening who has ever been out in public, especially at a bar, and you've gotten hit on by a creepy old white guy, like whoever you're picturing, that's what Preston Pierce looks like. 120%. He is the type of dude that you see and you immediately know something weird is going to happen. Now, when I say he's well known, he wasn't necessarily known by name, right? But when people see him, it's more of an, oh, that guy kind of a thing.
Okay.
Part of the reason he's not known by name is because, you know, he didn't always live in Parkersburg, and his name wasn't always Preston Pierce. Preston Pierce was born Darrell Eugene Lott.
That's quite a name change.
Indeed. Details on his background are sketchy, but he was allegedly a police officer in several different small towns in West Virginia, including Ravenswood, Williamstown, and Vienna. I've also seen several different people say that he was actually chief of police in Bellington, West Virginia, but I have not been able to independently verify that. I actually called the town of Bellington right before we recorded this because their website lists the current chief of police. And so I called and asked if there was anywhere that had a list of past chiefs of police. And the lady I spoke with is like, no, this is our first website. We just got it.
Oh, okay.
And she's like, you could try to call the current chief of police tomorrow, but call after 9 because he does school drop off before that.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
So anyway, I have not been able to independently verify whether or not Preston Pierce / Darrell Lott was ever chief of police there. But it has been independently verified that he was a police officer in several towns in West Virginia. His law enforcement career spanned over 12 years. Now, hopping back to unofficial sources, he allegedly shuffled around so much because of basically sexual harassment issues. All of this took place several decades ago, though, and police agencies aren't exactly like forthcoming with officer misconduct.
I mean, yeah, they're not forthcoming with officer misconduct now, let alone decades ago.
Yeah, in small towns. So it's not like, there weren't newspaper articles written about this. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like, and he probably wasn't directly fired from any of these.
Asked to resign.
Exactly, right? So it's like, I wasn't able to, again, independently verify.
There's no paper trail on it.
Right, right. I want to make that clear. So, like, all of this, please take with a grain of salt. Like, many different people have said that this is true, but again, not independently verified. But I bring it up not to spread rumors, but because it does seem credible based on more recent interactions that the public has had with him. In addition to this whole like police officer thing, switching jobs or whatever, as you picked up on, he changed both his first and last name, which is not a common thing for people to do.
No,
at all.
And it's a very drastic change too.
Oh yeah, like it's nothing close
Right.
to his given name. So, that does fit in with the story of like he's a disgraced police officer and really just wanted to like cut ties with the whole thing and start over,
Mm-hmm.
So he went from Daryl Lott to Preston Pierce sometime around 2007. Now, in recent years, he's lived in Parkersburg and has worked as a delivery driver for different companies, including DoorDash. Since he's been named as the last person who was with Gretchen Fleming, people in Parkersburg have come out and shared their experiences with him, mostly as customers to whom he delivered food, but also as coworkers in other jobs that he's held. In the Gretchen Fleming West Virginia TCR Facebook group, someone gathered over 40 screenshots of different people posting their horror stories of interactions with Preston Pierce. And here are just a few examples. Quote, "He followed me and a friend from front row to my way to my home without my knowledge. Thankfully, my friend was very alert and noticed he followed us, and my boyfriend was told and came outside and confronted him. Police were called." End quote. Now, I find this interesting because it's the same two bars.
Right.
Front row and my way.
Yeah. It's the same path.
Yeah. And this was apparently a couple of years before Gretchen went missing.
Does that pattern come up again?
The two bars?
Yeah.
Nothing I saw mentioned those two bars specifically. There's another place called Corral that he would allegedly go and play pool, and a lot of people had run-ins with him there as well. But that was only when I saw that mention these two particular places.
I was just wondering whether that particular behavior or path of travel was predatory.
Yeah, I don't know. But my way is only about 2 miles from his house.
Okay.
Or where he was living at the time of Gretchen's disappearance. I don't know if he was living in that place when this first incident happened,
gotcha.
but yeah, at the time he lived 2 miles away. So another person said, quote, "Before COVID hit in 2020, he was my DoorDash driver one night when I ordered food to the little gambling place I worked at. He came back hours later to tell me I was beautiful and sat at my bar. I was so creeped out that a DoorDash driver would do that. I texted my boss to see if she would come down and sit with me so I wasn't alone with him. We had to tell him to leave because he sat way past closing time. He found me on Facebook the same freaking night and would message me all the time to find out if I was working. He would come and sit in the parking lot till I left. My boss ended up coming back at closing time every night for a week straight to make sure I got safely to my car and stuff. And then COVID shut the bar down for a while and I never saw him again. I got such bad vibes from him then, so this is blowing my mind that other people went through the same thing." End quote.
She doesn't name the bar, but she references gambling.
Yeah.
I have no idea what the prevalence of gambling in West Virginia
I mean,
is.
it's pretty prevalent, so it could be any place, honestly.
Sure, but again, we're talking about Petersburg, which is a small town. And
oh, exactly.
There's probably only a few bars that have gambling.
Mm-hmm.
So decent likelihood that it's my way.
Again. Yeah, it very well could be. And so there were several people who also posted screenshots of messages that Preston Pierce had sent them. And it's like, there's one that was like, the text that you get from DoorDash, like, "I just picked up your order," and like, "Your order's on your way," like those texts.
Auto-generated, yeah.
Yeah. And then it goes to, hey, I didn't want to say anything, but you're really beautiful. Like, like stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like just creepy, creepy stuff. And so, yes, there are many more just like this and worse, much worse. Even in the episode of Disappeared, Jennifer, Gretchen's stepmother, says that she had a friend who saw Preston Pierce out at the bar one night and then woke up in his house the next day and had no idea how she had gotten there.
Yeah, I had thought when you originally described the interaction.
Yeah, him bringing her a drink.
Yeah, that maybe he had slipped something into her drink.
Right. And that's the prevailing theory.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened. Because, according to everyone, Gretchen had already been drinking that night. So she was already probably drunk, honestly. Again, which is fine.
Sure. Yeah, totally fine.
You can go out to a bar and you can get drunk. Like, that is absolutely okay. The theory is that he probably did slip her something and then somehow convinced her to go out to his car. Either he was going to take her home, he was going to help her find her purse, whatever it was.
Yeah.
But that's why she left with him. I mentioned earlier that police aren't releasing a ton of details about the actual evidence in this case. They have confirmed that Gretchen was seen leaving My Way directly behind Pierce. And that's mainly, I think, because David had seen the video. And so when when they did the episode of Disappear, David's like, yeah, this is exactly what happened. And so the detective who was interviewed was like, yes, that is what happened.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to fault the cops on not releasing anything at this point because it seems as though they haven't narrowed down to one suspect, which makes sense.
Right.
The last person to be seen with her. If they're trying to gather more evidence on him or whatever, at that point, they're building a case against him, so they need to keep it tight.
Exactly. And from what it seems, they started building a case against him very early on.
Which makes sense. I'm assuming they interviewed him at some point, but are probably not releasing any of that.
Correct. So yeah, because of the video evidence and honestly probably because of his reputation as well, police were comfortable enough to quickly name him as a person of interest in the case, though they didn't publicly name him as a person of interest. So basically by December 15th, 3 days into the investigation, they were telling reporters that, yes, we have a person of interest. They just didn't say that it was Preston Pierce.
Sure.
But by that point, 3 days in, they also executed their first search warrant for his home. On December 29th, Parkersburg Police Lieutenant James Stalnaker told Fox News Digital, quote, "We know she left with him. We believe that she traveled back to his residence with him. He's given inconsistent statements. Through his own admission, she was at one point in his vehicle, but he's claiming she didn't make it to his house. There's no indication they knew each other prior to this night." End quote.
She didn't make it to his house. So.
Yeah. So according to him, he dropped her off somewhere downtown.
At 3 a.m.
Yes.
Just
somewhere downtown.
Fucking random street corner downtown.
Basically, yes.
Without a purse, without a cell phone.
Correct.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, they weren't naming him at this time and they said, we are not naming him. He hasn't been charged with a crime, right?
Sure.
The name eventually did come out. And by the time the episode of Disappeared came out, it was already public. And this was that episode came out a little under a year after her disappearance. And, the interesting thing about his story, other than it just being stupid, is that no security cameras, ever caught any of that happening.
Right.
And John/Jason said that he actually drove downtown.
Around town, yeah.
Shortly after she would have left with this dude and didn't see her.
Right.
Again, it's a small town. She was on foot. If he had randomly dropped her off, somebody would have seen her.
Right.
By the time this December 29th article came out, police confirmed that they had executed multiple search warrants related to Preston Pierce. There was the December 15th warrant to search his home, but also warrants for his car, electronic devices, and phone records. They also said that they were awaiting results of forensic testing.
Of his car, house?
They didn't specify.
Okay.
Probably both, all of the above, you know. Parkersburg police chief told WCHS, quote, "Things have been collected." See, yeah, like real,
Yeah.
you know.
Real
Again,
official.
exactly. As standard, sent to the state laboratory for analysis and just awaiting results there. That's commonplace in a lot of investigations, and when that comes back, hopefully that proves fruitful, but in the meantime, this is not a waiting game. Our detectives are still following leads because, as I keep reiterating, the community really stepped up. The leads, the tips, the info, the phone calls, the Facebook messages, the emails, every one of them is getting vetted, end quote. By December 30th, police were telling reporters that their person of interest, who we now know to be Preston Pierce, had stopped cooperating, and they urged Parkersburg residents to comb through their own surveillance footage from December 4th and 5th to see if they had captured his car, which again was a black Nissan Rogue. In early February, multiple tips led police, joined by Mountaineer Area Rescue Group, to undertake a search for Gretchen in Mountwood Park. Mountwood Park is located 12 miles east of Parkersburg and contains more than 50 miles of hiking and biking trails, campgrounds, a 50-acre lake, and wooded picnic areas. Hundreds of civilian volunteers joined in the search. Police ended up taking a number of items into evidence, but it doesn't sound like anything was determined to be related to Gretchen. The next month, in March, another search was held at Johnson T. Janes Park, but similarly, nothing was found. By mid-February, police said that they had executed 10 search warrants in Gretchen's case. While there was a lot of criticism about what the public perceived as a slow investigation, Gretchen's family had nothing but praise for investigators, saying that they had been working very hard on her case. In May 2023, Detective James Zimmerman told WTAP that they were still waiting on results of DNA and other forensic testing from the West Virginia State Crime Lab. He also said that they were continuing to make progress on the case and hope to have more answers soon. By July, Gretchen's family was still positive and was praising Parkersburg Police's decision to outsource some of the testing in other parts of the investigation. David Fleming told WDTV, quote, "We started bringing in some outside agencies now that are going to be involved in looking at this case. So I think that's a very positive move too. I can't talk about in detail what they are doing, but they are outside agencies that are now going to be involved, and I think this is a very positive step."
Wow.
Parkersburg Police is obviously a very small police force, right? But they got right on the case. They didn't dilly-dally with their nonsense about her being an adult. They quickly identified a person of interest. They quickly, executed search warrants. They sent in forensic evidence for testing. They, vetted every lead that came in. They stayed in constant contact with the family.
Right. And that's a huge thing for me is that they involved the family.
Yeah, absolutely. And the family has said that, they hear from them like weekly still, basically. They've never not been able to get a hold of investigators. They've had all of their questions answered. It does not sound like there's, obviously, yes, like they want the case solved.
Right.
In an ideal world, they would have made an arrest immediately, but that's just not always the case.
You have to get the evidence first.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the evidence wasn't readily apparent. They had enough as evidence to lead them in a very specific direction, but not enough to make an arrest. And that's really just what it has come down to. The thing about this, too, is that, like police said, the community is heavily invested in this, and they have a lot to say. So, John/Jason is still considered a suspect by people in the community. But David, on that episode Disappear, they're like, listen, I don't think he had anything to do with it. He was so upset about the whole thing. He felt terrible because, he felt responsible, honestly. Like, he is the one who brought Gretchen there. She was supposed to leave with him. He lost track of her. and she hasn't been seen. Like something happened to her. You know, according to David, he just feels terrible about it. David has no suspicions toward him whatsoever. He has also been very clear on social media about who he does think is responsible for his daughter going missing.
Right.
That doesn't mean that he's right. We don't know.
Right. But we do know that surveillance footage has cleared Jason.
Yeah.
John.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely appears that
Or,
that's the case.
I wouldn't say cleared, but
Yeah. I mean, I think cleared is too strong of a
corroborates
word.
his crazy cockamamie story.
Right.
But I mean, hey, it corroborates it. So it wasn't
Exactly.
a crazy story. It was what actually happened.
Yeah.
Seems very bizarre to me, his behavior, but
Well, and I think that's part of like what people are having a hard time with, right?
Yeah.
Because they're like this.
well, didn't you say he's also married?
That's what I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, whatever. Bar friends. I get that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we have a small shitty bar right down the street from us that like there's people that you or I would run into at that bar that we would never go and hang out with, but we might talk to at that bar.
Yeah.
I don't know whether I would necessarily cart them around from one bar to the next, but I mean, it's different town, different circumstances, whatever. So I can definitely like see that.
Yeah.
It's just that his story seems crazy to just act or react the way that he did, not finding her. But again, there's surveillance footage that corroborates it.
Yeah. I mean, the part that I have trouble with is that she seemingly didn't realize that she didn't have her purse or her cell phone with her the entire time she was at the bar, which seems like it was a long time.
Yeah, but as you said, she was drinking.
Yeah.
This is late at night. It's closing time, so 2-3 in the morning.
It was 3. Yeah.
3 in the morning, and potentially she had been slipped something.
Exactly. Yeah. Sometime earlier. So yeah,
Right.
no, I mean, absolutely. Like it all ends up making sense,
Right.
but at face value,
not on the surface.
No,
right.
yeah, not at all.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, no, legit. If there wasn't video footage
Yeah.
proving John/Jason's story, like he'd be a number one suspect.
Well, yeah, because in what world does the guy who has the purse and the cell phone
Right.
of the woman who went missing, like, not be involved? Like, that's not how that works, you know?
Yeah, no, like everybody, police included, would be like, "Oh, you did."
Like, come
you
on,
did it."
man. Like,
Yeah, like-
be fucking for real. like,
her purse and cell phone were in your car.
yeah.
But I mean, look, there's evidence there
Yeah.
that
She left with somebody different, and not only somebody different, but somebody with a very long history.
of being sketchy as fuck.
Yes.
Yeah.
December 2023 was the 1-year anniversary of Gretchen's disappearance, and not much had changed since the summer. Pierce is still a person of interest, but by this time he had moved out of the rented home that police believe he took Gretchen to in the early hours of December 4th, 2022. He's apparently been moving around the state of West Virginia, and apparently, I don't know if this is the case, but was homeless for a time. He was recently seen back in Parkersburg at a fast food restaurant. And people are keeping an eye out for him. Like, they were taking pictures of him, posting it on Facebook. Like, this guy's back in town. Hide your kids, basically. Parkersburg, West Virginia has been deeply affected by Gretchen Fleming's disappearance. Facebook and other online forums are full of active discussions about her, Preston Pierce, and the other people involved in this case. She is very much cared for and very much missed. The last update that we've had on the forensic testing was in May of 2023, so we don't know if they've received all of the results or if there's anything that's still outstanding. Parkersburg police have said that they are methodically running down leads, and they're asking the public for any help or information that they may be able to offer. While investigators and Gretchen's family don't know exactly what happened to her or where she is now, they know that whatever happened was not her decision. Gretchen was taken. Now they're all searching for answers and hopefully for justice. Gretchen Fleming has been missing from Parkersburg, West Virginia since December 4th, 2022. She's a white female with brown hair and brown eyes. She was approximately 5'2" and 125 pounds at the time of her disappearance. She was 27 when she went missing. She would be 29 today. Anyone with information regarding Gretchen Fleming's disappearance is asked to call lead detective James Zimmerman at 304-424-1072 or the police department's main line at 304-424-8444. You can see all the sources for this episode along with photos and videos at our website, andthentheyweregone.com.
And be sure to follow us on social, and Then They Were Gone Pod on Facebook and at ATTWG Pod on Instagram and TikTok. If you like what we're doing, please subscribe and consider leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It will help new listeners find us. And the more people that listen, the more chances we have of bringing someone home.
And we'll see you here next week for a brand new episode.
See you next week.
And Then They Were Gone is hosted by Kona Gallagher and Ethan Flick. All research, writing, and editing is done by me, Kona Gallagher. The music is The Stork by Ketsa. Additional music is provided by Kai Engel. And Then They Were Gone is a Little Monster production.
Hey,